we all need that reprieve from technology. Blue light is obviously a big one. There's pretty extensive research on that. And, you know, evolutionarily, we evolved with the light of the sun. That was the only light, or if you made a fire, right? So whenever the sun set, most of the blue light was gone because the sun was our only natural source of blue light. And when the sun came up, that's when you got the blue light again, and your circadian rhythm was regulated to that.
Mm.
Nowadays, our circadian rhythm is all over the place. We're getting exposure to cell phone screens and laptops at night, which put out blue light up to 5 to 10 times more powerful than even the sun in terms of our eyes. And what that does is it suppresses all our natural melatonin production in the evenings, which melatonin doesn't just affect sleep. It affects bones, it affects inflammation, it affects lots of different things. So it's really disrupting our physiologic rhythms across the board.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with my eye doctor. Welcome to the show. Bhargav, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. I'm really excited about the topics we're going to cover today. You know, we spent a lot of time here talking about healthcare and wellness and fitness and nutrition. And so I feel like there's a bunch of that kind of wrapped up in the conversation today. So again, thank you for spending the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting about all of that. No, they're all my favorite topics.
Well, you know, it's interesting because most people that I talk to have very discrete specialties and they've done very specific things. But you've had kind of things all over the place, which I think is really cool. I think they're tied together in the back somehow. And so we should talk about those. So why don't we start by you introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what you're doing today?
Yeah, for sure. So my background training is as a physician. I'm currently in a child and adolescent psychiatry research track fellowship at Brown University. So finishing up the last year of that. So I did general adult psychiatry training and then child and adolescent, and then also research along the way. Most of my research is around trauma, PTSD, resilience, and post-traumatic growth. I actually have a book coming out on that later, early in 2026. In terms of my other backgrounds, I'd also have done an MBA in healthcare administration. I've worked with healthcare administration kind of across the board, was previously, most recently, chief medical officer of Sully AI, which is a healthcare AI company. So I also have some background in AI as well. So really my expertise lies at the intersection of healthcare, AI, and business. And then I also have some passion projects. Like I also started in med school a vegan nutrition company because nutrition and fitness is just a passion of mine. So that's another side project that I love doing.
Man, that's pretty awesome. And it's such a big, broad list of topics. The fitness and nutrition piece is kind of cool because if I have read right, you are hiking national parks. Is that right? That's one of your fitness things?
I am. Yeah, I
And
love fitness in the outdoors. That's like my thing.
yeah, you know, like most people don't have the ambition to hike all the national parks. And so how far along are you on that?
So there's 63. I've done 11 of them at this point.
Wow. Wow,
Most
wow,
recent were
wow.
Grand Canyon and Mount Zion.
That's pretty awesome. You have a
Cool.
timeline? Do you know how long it's going to take you to get to all 63?
It's a great question. I don't have a specific timeline. I really go on the inspiration and how everything else is going on in the schedule.
That's pretty awesome. So, you mentioned founding a nutrition company, and so we should talk about that a little bit
Yep.
because you know there is lots of conversation today around nutrition and how important nutrition is within general health, with effects on not just the physical being, but maybe on the mental being, the mental health,
Mhm.
and thinking about how nutrition may change gut biome, and there's just a lot. And so, how did you get started in a nutrition supplement company?
So it really started when I was around 15, 16 years old. My grandpa was diagnosed with lung cancer, and that was due to
Mm,
smoking and other things. But I really got interested in just physiology, body, disease, health in general from that. It was kind of the inspiration. And I just kept diving deeper and deeper into it because I saw how much potential it had to enhance people's lives as well as help people. And from there, I dove into it. I actually really love what you said about it affecting not only like your physical health, but your mental health, because that's becoming more and more of a topic as research has gone deeper and deeper. Interestingly,
mhm,
thousands of years ago, Ayurveda, the Indian system of science, like the ancient system of science, said every food you eat not only affects directly, they essentially said the idea that it contains energy that affects your mind and then nutrients that affect your body. So they
mm.
made the direct connection between the food you eat and the thoughts you think. And in many ways, we're discovering that today, right? With the microbiome research, how the food you eat affects your microbiome, which release compounds which, through the gut brain axis, literally change how you feel. So, that was my start in it, and then just kept going from there, and it got to a tipping point where that was the next logical step.
Well, it's you bring up an interesting point because historically, ancient societies have really thought about the combination of food and the outcomes, I think, differently than we are even able to interpret today with modern science, right? And so it's interesting to think that parallel cultures were thinking about these things at the same time, but separately. Because if you think about traditional Chinese medicine, I mean, that's one of the things that is very integral to that philosophy is
For
thinking
sure.
about which foods and when and what those foods might do and how that affects your energy and then how that energy affects your overall well-being. And so you got to this tipping point. Were you already in medical school? Were you an undergraduate? Like, when did you get to this tipping point that you said, I gotta figure out how to do my own supplementation and make that available to other people?
Yeah. So what happened was through this years of 7, 8 years at that point of like research and diving in and reading every book and everything I could on the topic, I developed this protocol for myself, which
Mm,
included my lifestyle, exercise, sleep, all those things. And then on top of that, so I believe the foundation for all health, the 90% is your exercise, your sleep, and your like diet. Then the
mm-hmm,
last 10% is supplements. They're adding that extra, giving you that extra edge, helping provide those extra nutrients that your diet may not be achieving. So that's that extra 10%. So I'd created a protocol of like supplements for myself based on all the things I had learned
mm,
in my research. And I was taking it, but it was complex. It was a bunch of different things. And other people started taking it. And that's where it really reached that tipping because a lot of other people started taking it, they're like, and then they felt great on it, just like I did. And, physicians I was working with and everything. I was in medical school at the time. And
mm.
everyone was like, I heard this multiple times that if you guys could just simplify this down, it would really be amazing. And after I heard it, maybe the fourth or fifth time, I was like, maybe I can give it a try. I had no clue how to start a company, had never started a company before. I was like, let me explore it. I did. And the rest went from there. Learned a lot along the way. And the company's still running today.
Wow. Wow. So if you can think about one of the major things you learned in the process of starting a company and maybe getting it off the ground, what did you learn?
Whew, so many things, honestly. I have an uncle who says starting a business is the best like life experience you can get because it teaches you about so many things. It teaches you about people, it teaches you about money, it teaches you about marketing, it teaches you about how the world works. And it's like the best crash course in like the world that you can really get. And that's what it felt like. It was intense. It started in the middle of my surgery rotation in my third year of med school, which is
Oh,
you're
wow.
known to be a crazy rotation. I was up till 2, 3 a.m. many nights, so I was not fulfilling my sleep thing very well that month. But that's when it started, and then learned so much along the way. So I think the core takeaways were if you really want to do something, just give it a shot. You'll learn along the way, and if you fail, you fail. That's a learning experience. It's still a victory.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, I think people sometimes are a little bit afraid to take the big step and do that thing that they've been kind of thinking about. And having it not be successful is not necessarily a failure as much so as it's an opportunity to learn how to do it differently. And I think once you start thinking about it in those terms, it actually opens up your way of thinking about a lot of things and enables you to go out and do some of these amazing events.
Yeah, if you think of anything in life, we learn by failing. We're constantly adjusting. Like even if you look at neuroscience or just life, it's like how do you learn to ride a bicycle? You fall a few times, you try, you have the training wheels, but you're failing in little ways, and then your brain identifies those little ways you failed and keeps adjusting till you get it right. And so
Yeah.
that's really true for life in general.
And so you mentioned your grandfather having having cancer. Was
Yep.
that also the impetus for medical school?
Yes, that was also the impetus for medical school. Initially, when I started undergrad, I was considering a lot of different things. I was interested in economics and law, philosophy. I actually did end up majoring in philosophy and religious studies. So I was curious to explore philosophies from around the world. But yeah, I still maintained my pre-medical curriculum after I decided because I really just wanted to go deep into understanding how the body works. Because, when you're younger, my grandpa was basically like my dad. I grew up with him
Mm.
pretty much all throughout my childhood. So it was just an experience that hits to your core. And so it really left me with a lot of questions and curiosity that, as you can see with all the different things I do, curiosity is like one of my driving forces. I'm like, I don't understand this. Got to go explore it.
That's the best. Without people who do that, we would not get very far. And so I think it's amazing. But then how did you land though in psychiatry?
So I considered a few different fields when I was in medical school, but I really just fell in love with the mind and like understanding. So after a period into medical school, I was like, I'm either going to do psychiatry or I'll do neurology. And
Okay.
I realized the part that I loved most was the neuroscience of how we make decisions, how
Mm.
addiction works. For my grandpa, it was the smoking that led to the lung cancer. And it's so just understanding all the things that psychiatry explores, like how the brain works, how that leads to our decisions, our emotions, our thoughts, addictions, all of those things were the part that really intrigued me. So that's what really led me to psychiatry.
And specifically though, you went through adult psychiatry, but you also now are concentrating more on adolescent and pediatric. Um,
Yeah.
how did you make that decision? Because I mean, it's interesting to think about impacting people who are developing versus, I guess, in a way, having to try to unwind some of the things that may have happened to someone as they've gotten older.
Definitely. So, I mean, the way the training works in general, you have to do, it's called general psychiatry, but it's
Mm.
mostly adult first anyway. And then if you want to do child and adolescent, you add on like an additional subspecialization in it. So that's what I did. The reason behind that was twofold. I really wanted to explore the whole spectrum. I feel like understanding adults is contingent on understanding children and adolescents and how they developed to that stage as adults. And so that was really a core inspiration behind that. And the second thing was early intervention. I think you can do a lot
Mm.
in child psychiatry to prevent things or address things early before they really become major problems. And I think there's pretty good outcomes in many cases because of that. So that was the second inspiration behind child psychiatry.
Well, it's interesting to for me to kind of think about where we are today and the way we approach mental health in general.
Mhm.
There has long been a stigma associated with mental health and seeking help.
Mhm.
And so I think we have really moved into a spot where, from an adult perspective, it is not that unusual,
Yeah.
and people are much more in touch with the fact that they may actually need help, and people are more accepting. From a young person's perspective, though, it is still a little bit different, and
Yeah.
I feel like there's more developing as a young person today looks different than developing as a young person even 30 or 40 years ago.
Yep.
And that has to have an effect on where they are mentally, and maybe you're seeing some of that.
Absolutely. The times have changed and they're consistently changing as always, but even from 15 years ago, it's a different world today.
Mm,
If you grew up, let's say around the early 2000s, just 25 years ago or less, it was still a different time. Most kids didn't have a smartphone from like 2 years
mm.
old or, an iPad or whatever. So things have really changed, and the way these technologies affect our brain is still somewhat unexplored, but also there's significant evidence that there can be lots of harmful effects. That doesn't mean it's all harmful. There is benefit to technologies like social media and, all the technology inundation we have today. But there are also harms, and we don't, it brains, these young child brains that are being affected by everything around them can be affected in a significant way by the technology they're exposed to and these tools that are out there.
Yeah, are you seeing more anxiety in younger people these days based on some of those things?
Yeah, I definitely think anxiety has increased. One thing I think about also is ADHD, right? So if you think
Mm,
about how ADHD works, it's a lot of it is controlled by the dopaminergic and noradrenergic systems in the brain. And when you're using social media, when you're using iPads, when you're using all these technology tools, you're getting constant hits of dopamine. It, even people that don't have ADHD like feel like their attention is stretched more thin than ever before with
mm.
all the short form content, short form videos, all these things, and constant messages, notifications, all these things we didn't have before. So even someone without ADHD is feeling like their attention is more stretched thin. And that may be why we're seeing some rise in the prevalence of ADHD. It may also be that we're more mindful of it now as mental health has become more and
Mm.
more destigmatized. I think it's a combination of factors, but I think a lot of these conditions are going up partially due to more recognition and then partially due to the state of the world and the state of technology today.
And as you think about then kind of our go forward, as you mentioned before, sleep is one of those things that's on the list of very important, right? And foundational. One of the things that can be interrupted from a sleep perspective is when you're dealing with having the scrolling and you're dealing with the devices, it can have an impact on sleep. And so there's studies around changes in exposure to blue light, as an example. On my end of the world, blue light exposure is one of those things that we work on, and there's lots of research around that.
Yeah.
How do we start to think about the impact of these devices in our normal day to day? And are there things that we should be thinking about just as laymen when it comes to regulating devices for adults or our children?
Yeah, I think it's crucial for both adults and children, right? We all need that reprieve from technology. Blue light is obviously a big one. There's pretty extensive research on that. And, you know, evolutionarily, we evolved with the light of the sun. That was the only light, or if you made a fire, right? So whenever the sun set, most of the blue light was gone because the sun was our only natural source of blue light. And when the sun came up, that's when you got the blue light again, and your circadian rhythm was regulated to that.
Mm,
Nowadays, our circadian rhythm is all over the place. We're getting exposure to cell phone screens and laptops at night, which put out blue light up to 5 to 10 times more powerful than even the sun in terms of our eyes. And what that does is it suppresses all our natural melatonin production in the evenings, which melatonin doesn't just affect sleep, it affects bones, it affects inflammation, it affects lots of
mm,
different things. So it's really disrupting our physiologic rhythms across the board. And so things like blue light glasses have become popular in biohacking circles and other places. They're becoming more mainstream now. I have my pair. And you actually do feel like they do relieve that strain off your eyes when you use them in the evening. And I do personally, anecdotally, get better sleep when I do use them in the evening.
mm.
But those things are important. I think we're just teasing out all the pieces of how technology is affecting our physiology, and I think that's good. It's not to say I don't think we need to go to one extreme or the other, like get rid of all the technology or use it all the time without being mindful. I think it's being mindful, understanding it, and then taking the right interventions to get the benefit without all the harms or mitigating the harms.
I think that's really powerful because people think in terms of black and white, on or off, right? And so it is very difficult for you to completely ignore technology in the world in which we live.
For
And
sure.
so if that's kind of your standard, oh, I can't have it, then you instantly fail, and then that's not great either, right? And so being able to
Exactly.
think about it in terms of moderation, I think makes a lot of sense. Um, you know, I'm curious as to how you think about this onslaught of dopamine and changes in brain chemistry associated with blue light and neuroplasticity, because this thought of neuroplasticity is very interesting to me, and that you can make your brain can rewire itself around things over time. If, as an example, if we're talking addiction, or we're talking habit change, we're talking depression, or we're using talk therapy combined with medication, we
Mhm.
can kind of speed these things up. But they're all based on just brain chemistry being either facilitating or making it very difficult to have the remodeling. How do you think about neuroplasticity and the exposure to devices and this dopamine onslaught that we're facing today?
Well, I think you bring up a very important point. First, with the neuroplasticity in general, in the trauma book that I have coming out, that one of the core themes of that framework for recovery and for really all brain change in general is neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and like neurogenesis. Like these are the core components of how all change happens. Now, whether that
Mm,
change is induced through a supplement, a medication, exercise, a mindset, your environment, we're constantly responding to our environment. And so it is changing our brain. Neuroplasticity isn't just in one thing. It's our brain is plastic and it's constantly changing throughout the
mm,
days, weeks, and years. So what we do does change how our brain works. It changes how our neurons wire. As the adage goes, it's what fires together wires together, meaning which neurons fire
huh.
at similar times literally wire to each other and form new connections, and that changes. So whether that's using blue light or exercising or anything we do, it's going to change. Now, the level of complexity in analyzing that is so deep that it's hard to know exactly what's happening, uh,
Mm.
because the brain is an incredibly complex organ with, trillions of connections. And so it's beyond our comprehension really at this stage to get those exact specifics, but that's what we're working on. And I think blue light is impacting it. I think it's leading to more insomnia. It's leading to more sleep problems across the board than
Mm.
maybe we had 20, 30 years ago. And because when you're constantly using these blue light devices at night, maybe you're rewiring, and this is not concrete yet, but maybe you're rewiring your brain to not produce as much melatonin in general, or other things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I guess, where I'm so curious, and I'm glad that there's lots of research going on to help answer some of those questions, right?
Mhm.
Because when you start to think about the things that we do on a daily basis, we don't always know what the long-term implications are, and it takes a long time and a lot of research to be able to understand this thing does that thing over time, right? And so I just think it's really important for people to kind of think about what are the things that I'm doing on a daily basis that maybe I could think differently about. And will that have some sort of anecdotal effect on the way I feel, the way I perform, or the way my mind or body works? And I just think that's important.
Absolutely. I was just reading something by a neuroscientist that even when you change your perspective of why you're doing something, you are changing your brain.
Mm,
There's an area of the brain called the orbitofrontal cortex, which is evaluating reward from what you're doing. So the focus of the article was the idea that when you change your mindset from I have to do this to I get to do this, it's just a little shift in how your brain perceives reward and completely changes how your brain and body react to tasks that you have to do. So even little subtle changes have a significant impact on how your brain does things.
Well, and you mentioned your book and the work around trauma. Where did that subject matter come from, and how does that really start to fit in? Because I think it fits into this conversation a little bit, particularly around response to trauma and subsequently getting past that trauma.
Yeah, the book, the core inspiration behind it was that there's not really there's certain books out there. My main area of research is trauma, PTSD, and and my main area of interest. I've worked with a lot of veterans and at the VA and in different areas. So
Hmm.
that's been an area that I've been particularly interested in. And with trauma, there's whole obviously that term has become more loosely used in a way
Hmm.
over time, which is good. There's an increasing awareness of trauma and a destigmatization of trauma. But there's still that distinction. There's like trauma, which a lot of people experience. There's varying severities of trauma. And then there's also like PTSD, which is a response to generally pretty severe traumas. And so
Mm,
the book is more
okay.
focused a little bit more on PTSD, where it's people that have PTSD, how they can, one, understand what's going on in their body, in their mind, their symptoms, as well as the options that there are for recovery and like the principles of resilience and post-traumatic growth, because not everyone who experiences trauma ends up in PTSD. Around 70, by some estimates, 70% of the population experiences a major trauma at some point in their lifetime, whereas the lifetime prevalence of PTSD is around 8 to 10%. So
I see.
it's not that everyone who experiences major trauma will end up with PTSD, but a lot of people actually end up with post traumatic growth as well. And what leads to that is obviously a combination of things, risk factors around it, how many traumas someone experienced, how severe they were, and, their mental state at the time. So there's lots of things that go into that. But the book is really, it was written kind of as it was a book for the general public, so people could reach
Mm.
out. It's a user-friendly format and it's readable. It's not dense with scientific language, so you can really understand what's going on if you're someone struggling with trauma or curious about trauma.
And you mentioned that the prevalence of PTSD versus exposure to trauma. Um, what is it about trauma exposure then that can develop into PTSD? It because I would think that we can use an example. So maybe it's a car accident, maybe,
Mhm.
and in a car accident, you can maybe have a fear of having an accident again, so you don't want to get into the car. Slowly
Yeah.
you get into the car, then you're driving the car, and then over time you're back to enjoying being in the car again.
Yeah.
With PTSD, there's more of a reliving of the event, and it's ingrained in the brain. Why is it that some people are able to take the steps to um, get back in the car, and other people relive the event every time they get back in?
Yeah, and it's a question we don't have a perfect answer to, and I think part of that is it's a combination of things. One, when it happened, what happened afterwards. So it's like if
Mm,
we're saying theoretically it's an equally severe accident and situation for two people, there's so much more that goes into that. What was their life leading up to that point? Were they already like in a really bad place and then this
mm,
happens? Were they doing fine? Do these are some of what we call resilience factors. So did they have the appropriate social supports afterwards that helped them process that? Did they were they in an extremely stressful period and didn't have time to process that? Because a lot of processing major traumas is, can you debrief it? Can you talk through it? Can you process the emotions and feelings of it? If you don't, they fester and can lead more likely to PTSD
I
versus
see.
where if they get processed, which is why a lot of the treatments for PTSD are actually what are called trauma focused psychotherapies. And what that means is you're actually talking through the experience of the trauma in vivid detail, which seems counterintuitive. But when you talk through that experience and you focus on that experience, you actually process the thoughts, emotions, and feelings of that experience. And then the symptoms start to go down. So you can think of it as the trauma overwhelmed the brain's processing ability at the time. And thus, these flashbacks, nightmares are like intruding into the mind to try and get processed, is one way I think about it.
That's really interesting to think about it in those terms, and it makes total sense. It
Yeah.
also then makes sense that first responders and veterans would be in situations where they would be maybe more likely to
Mhm.
experience PTSD, given their roles don't really leave time for always of being
Yeah.
able to talk through those traumatic events.
Exactly, and that those are two of the groups we see some of the highest rates of PTSD with, because of that, the high pressure, the things you're exposed to, which can be horrific, and really not getting the time to debrief, and so that's a big concern, and definitely an area where people experience a lot of PTSD.
We in talking about talk therapy,
Mhm.
I think that the world is changing again when it comes to talk therapy because of the introduction of AI,
Mhm.
and so we have now our somewhat friendly chatbots that people can
Yeah.
talk to, and in no means are these fully educated professionals, but they give the impression of being able to give solid advice.
Yeah.
Have you heard about, been involved in any research or any understanding of what's happening with people and how they interact with these chatbots?
Yes. So, by some statistics, that's one of the number one uses being used like for ChatGPT today, which is like companionship, therapy, like loneliness, those kinds of things, which is not what people thought initially when it was first made that it would most commonly be used for. But there's pros and cons to it. I think it can be an incredible tool with the proper guardrails. I think the danger is there isn't the proper guardrails. While they have been trained on a lot of the information, may say some very wise or brilliant things at the time. If we understand the underlying architecture of these AI tools, they're they're statistical prediction engines that are
Hmm.
guessing what the proper response for something would be. But we've already seen in the news some horror stories of like, oh, well, the person asked how to commit suicide doing blank, and the chatbot just told them exactly how to do it. And so
Right.
those are the dangers that exist with that kind of chatbot versus an actual therapist who isn't going to give you that information, right? So these AI therapy tools could be very useful. They'll just need the proper guardrails, rigorous testing, and there are some that have been trained on specific therapy protocols, and they would actually stick to those proper protocols, like a cognitive behavioral therapy protocol, and they won't go rogue and start saying random things. Those can be very useful. So it's still in its early stages, but I think that the truth is we don't have enough therapists for the amount of patients that need
Mhm.
them, the amount of people that want them. And especially in certain areas of the country, they're very inaccessible, even with some telemedicine and therapy. But so that's where technology can serve as an extender. It can serve as a tool to give people access versus not having any access at all. And so as long as we design it with the proper guardrails, it has incredible potential. So yeah, that's
I,
that's
I'm I 100% agree with you around access. I mean, there are always questions about the validity of telemedicine, what telemedicine can be used to evaluate and then subsequently treat. And there, in my mind, the question becomes left untreated, where does this person land versus having the ability to have some interaction with a healthcare professional from a telemedicine perspective, and maybe it is not the ideal interaction, but it can guide the patient then to where they need to go in order to get what they should have, rather than letting it sit there, right?
without question. I think we get so caught up in what the perfect way to do something is, but the, we don't. Is 50 better than zero? Yes. In most
Yes.
cases, 50 is better than zero, even if we're not getting 100%. You're improving care and you're getting people access to care. And so I think we need to be careful of what we're arguing. If we're saying that's not the best way for every case, that's fine. But for most straightforward cases, telemedicine is adequate and is far better than people not accessing care at all. So I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think You've raised a really important point about the shortage in providers,
Mhm.
particularly in rural markets. It's getting very difficult to have the number of providers you need to help the people that are looking to be helped.
Mhm.
Telehealth is a way of extending the reach of providers, but so is increasing efficiency within the exam rooms or in the facilities. And
Mhm.
that's where things like AI can actually be really beneficial because a big part of seeing anybody is the charting, right?
True.
And so if you are a patient and you've never been on the provider side, you've
Mhm.
seen them putting things into the
Yeah.
chart, but you don't have any idea how much stuff is really going in there. And I think the technology you worked on was partially helpful for some of that, right?
Yeah, so at Sully AI, where I was chief medical officer and previously medical director, we worked on a lot of different tools to help physicians, physician facing tools. So for scribing notes or for looking up treatment plans or developing other things along those lines to help simplify the cognitive load of a physician's work and to help them focus more on the patient. Especially the ambient scribing tools could save up to 2 hours a day that a physician might have spent at home after work trying to chart, not getting to spend time with their families or in the patient rooms. They're staring at their computer typing away. Why? Because we have so much admin burden. It's the number one cause for physician burnout. And because no one went, I don't think anyone went into medicine to type notes. I think most people went into medicine to take care of patients. And we want to give that richness of the human experience back to physicians and patients so it can be more fulfilling. And I think there's a lot of great AI tools that are out there today that will do that. And they're all in their earlier stages, but they will make that life easier for physicians, hopefully. I mean, I always hesitate to make a definitive statement on any technology because we thought electronic medical records would make things better. They made things far worse for physicians. So you never know how things will ultimately play out, but these tools can really help reduce burnout and improve physicians' lives.
And I mean, that's such an interesting point. Electronic medical records, they have definitely made things better for a patient from a patient perspective.
Mhm.
They no longer have to try to decipher
Yeah.
penmanship. They have these portable records that can be concise and they can take them electronically to wherever they need to take them. But it really has challenged the way physicians think about patient care because all systems are not the same. They don't all talk to each other,
Yeah.
and you have to learn them very specifically, and they can be a distraction, right? So you've got the person in front of you that you really want to pay attention to, but you also in the back of your head think, I also got to get all this stuff in here.
Yeah.
And where you could think about scribing, you could think about writing, putting it into that record though is key and very tough to do. And so I love the thought about this about technology being able to then help us get those things into the chart in a way that's much more efficient and allows redirection back towards the patient as far as that conversation and really looking to help them with what their needs are.
Absolutely.
So if someone out here listening wanted to learn more about you, they wanted to find your book, what would they do? How would they do that?
The generally the easiest way to find me is on my LinkedIn. I will eventually have a website, still working on it, but
There.
generally through LinkedIn, I have lots of content that I put out on AI and healthcare and trauma and all these things. My book will be coming out in early 2026, so the name will be Trauma Transformed. So if it's someone's listening after early 2026, they'll probably see the book. It'll be available on Amazon and in bookstores and in other places.
That's awesome. I will make sure to put your LinkedIn in the description for the show and all the show notes. And we'll leave a placeholder for your book. And so when it is published and ready to go, I'll slide back and put that into the description too. So that way people who listen to it later can point and click and not have to remember or try to find it.
Awesome.
Well, this has been fantastic. I've learned a lot and I really appreciate you spending the time. And I look forward to reading the book and following you and learning more about what you do. It feels like you've done all these big things already. So I can't imagine what you're going to do next.
I really appreciate it. This was a pleasure. It was great chatting.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show because we're working really hard to bring you great content and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.